Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give everybody just one more minute to log on and get situated, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, well, it looks like the numbers have plateaued on attendees with a few folks slowly coming in. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, Loudoun County. Thank you all for attending our second for today, Linear Park and Trail Community Meeting. We are excited to host you all as a part of our first community meeting day, we'll call it, for the Linear Park and Trails Plan. My name is Emily McCoy, and I am with Design Workshop in our Raleigh studio, who is leading the Linear Parks and Trails Plan with the county. On the call today are my colleagues, Corey Dodd, Lindsay Naylor, and Adeline Lerner, who are going to be helping me throughout the presentation, fielding questions, and then Lindsay will present the second half of the presentation this evening. A few housekeeping items before we begin. The presentation is being recorded, and we will be making the recording available on the county's website after today. So please, feel free to share that with your colleagues, neighbors, and family for those that couldn't be in attendance this evening. We will present an update on the planning process for Linear Parks and Trails for about 40 to 50 minutes, leaving time for about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. For that Q&A period, we ask that you type your questions using the Q&A tool, the Zoom tool that should be at the top or bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions that you have throughout the presentation at the end. Any other questions that we're not able to get to tonight, we will post answers to on the county's website. So the plan for this evening is to, one, review of the introduction to the project about the Linear Parks and Trails Plan, just a little background information and schedule and sort of just the basics of where we are in the planning process. Sometimes we will refer to the Linear Parks and Trails Plan, since it is a mouthful, as the LPAT plan. So if you do see that acronym, just know that that's what we are referring to. And then we're also going to talk about the planning process itself, just so that we're showing you where we are in the process, where we're headed, and what to expect in our next touch point with you all. We'll also be reviewing, as a part of our scope of work, a master plan, the introduction of a master plan for a signature project, which is a closer look at a linear park and trail planning effort that is a part of this larger LPAT plan that we're putting together. Lindsay will walk us through that project. That's a great resource that we have as a part of this planning resource as we dive into the planning, because it takes a finer look at an actual area in Loudoun County, trying to implement some of the strategies that we're exploring as a part of the LPAT plan in real time, and then using that information to inform the overall planning process. So Lindsay will walk us through where we are with that signature project. And then lastly, we'll leave you all with ways to remain engaged throughout the planning effort, and how you can support and inform the plan moving forward through the life of the project. So we're going to first start with, where do you live? So we have a polling question here. I'm going to launch it right now, and we're going to give you about 30 seconds to let us know where you all are. So these are the planning sub areas for Loudoun County. There's about 10 of them that we've listed here, and we love just a snapshot of where everybody's located, whether it be in the Northwest or near Dulles, or Ashburn or beyond. So we'll just give you all about 10 more seconds to answer that question, and then we'll post the responses. It looks like we have a slightly different make up then our meeting earlier today. We had another call at 12:30, which had really great attendance too. So I'm going to end the polling, and it looks like we have 85% has voted. So I'm going to end the polling and share the results. It looks like the winner is the Ashburn area, which is very different than what we saw today. Let's see, the second would be the Sterling area. So thank you all for joining us wherever you are in Loudoun County. So I'll jump right into the project introduction. We thought it was important as a part of this conversation to make sure that we're all on the same page or definitions on what a linear park and a trail is. So we wanted to start with the definition of a linear park. Linear parks are elongated open space corridors that are managed for conservation, recreation, and/or multimodal transportation values. They typically fall along an alignment of a natural or open space feature, such as a riverfront, a stream valley, a ridgeline, but also could be overland across a former railroad right-of-way, a scenic road, or other routes. Trails. For the purposes of this planning effort, we're defining trails as a path for non-motorized multi-use recreation. These users of trails could include walkers, mountain bikers, equestrians, nature enthusiasts, trail runners, dog walkers, and more. And it's important here to make the determination too that the focus on the linear parks and trails effort is on non-paved trail surfaces. There are a couple other planning efforts going on in the county with regards to parks and then also transportation. And this helps us sort of separate the scope of work between those other three planning efforts. However, of course, we'll be taking into consideration all modes of transportation and connecting them to the overall linear parks and trails plan. But for the purposes of this, we'll be focusing on paths as defined as non-motorized multi-use recreational trails throughout the county. As I mentioned just a second ago, we're lucky in that there are other really important planning projects happening in Loudoun County. One of those is the Parks Plan. And we are lucky that that PROS, who's leading that effort, has done a great job of conducting surveys across the county. And what's wonderful to see is that there's quite consensus on and need, stated need from the community on this idea of having more trails in the county, whether they be paved or unpaved. So this chart here from that planning effort shows where the community has identified areas or facilities that are partly met or not met in the county, and water and river access you'll see at the top, and then the third and fourth down are trails paved and unpaved. In addition to establishing the need across the county for trails, there also is consensus on these trail networks being a high priority, and you'll see unpaved natural trails here at the top of the list on the right-hand side of your screen. And as we just answered with the sub-planning areas, as you all just responded to where you're located, the surveys also indicate consensus that paved and unpaved trails are needed and should be high priority wherever you live. So all communities agree that trails are important for the future of Loudoun County, from whether it be a park standpoint or a linear parks and trails standpoint. We also wanted to show you all the LPAT project statement that has been put together by the LPAT subcommittee, who is our sort of guiding light for the planning of this project. And we won't put the whole statement up of the goals of the project and the vision for the project, but wanted to just talk through quickly these bulleted items that are important to note on the project goals. So number one, we want to create an interconnected and safe system for the county. We want to provide multi-use passive recreation amenities. connect communities with each other and the wealth of resources that you have in the county, whether they be cultural resources or natural resources. We're hoping that the plan also supports this idea of providing multiple benefits, so not just recreation benefits, but a myriad of benefits, whether they be environmental or social or even economic. We want to prioritize multi-use public access trails, particularly on public land. That is one of the stated priorities. Protect and enhance the ecological value of our trail corridors. Many of these corridors go through or can go through sensitive environmental areas, so we want to make sure that we're not degrading any of those corridors, but enhancing those as a part of the process. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that we're providing additional community benefits such as economic development and human health and well-being, particularly in light of COVID and the needs for the community given the global pandemic that we find ourselves in. Our scope of work for the LPAT plan there's a myriad of items that we'll be addressing. So one, which is the big one, is addressing the Loudoun County Linear Parks and Trails Framework Plan. So what is the overall plan for the county? Where are those trail corridors best suited? What are the tools that we have to execute that plan? We'll also be looking at design elements and design guidelines for different trail types, whether it be from a character standpoint or a use standpoint. This includes thinking through in detail about intersections and also underpasses or overpasses, or making those critical connections, whether it be across roads or across waterways. Also, a very important part of the process is putting together implementation strategies and what we're calling mostly real estate and finance toolbox for the county to execute the plan. It's not enough to have a well thought out plan, but we want the plan to be executable. And so that is a part of our scope of work. Also, community engagement is also very important in providing feedback to us on what the community needs are. And so this is just the beginning of many conversations that we hope to have with you all to help drive the values and the goals for the LPAT project. And then last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the signature project is meant to be a master plan that looks at a specific area of the county to fill gaps in an established loop that we can use as a testing ground for testing some of these real estate strategies and other ideas for how these connections might be made at a finer scale than just looking at the county, but looking at it at a much sort of boots on the ground approach to understanding how these tools may or may not be helpful. And so it's very much an iterative process between the signature project, learning from trying to execute in a small scale a connected loop plan between the larger framework for the county that's meant to be sort of countywide and also beyond the county trail system. So as a part of the planning process, we just wanted to walk you through where we are today. So we're right here in the middle. The beginning process, the first step in any good planning process is to collect all of your baseline data on trails and community resources. And so we have been continuing to go through that process, but are now at a good point where we have as much of a database, a strong database as we need to move forward. We've begun to identify potential gaps and opportunities in the existing LPAT system across the county. And then we're looking for you all to provide input, priorities, and direction as we begin to weigh those different opportunities and priorities across the county to fill in those gaps to create this connected linear park and trail system for the future of Loudoun County. We will then, once we get feedback from you all, there's 2 touch points. So we have a touch point with you tonight, and then we'll touch back with you in about a month from now, at the end of March, beginning of April, to show progress. And then from that, we'll get feedback and put forth a draft plan for public review and consideration. And then we'll be looking forward to completing the plan and hopefully having the plan adopted by late summer of this year. So we just wanted to walk you through what we've been up to with regards to collecting baseline information. We put our baseline data that we need to inform the plan into these 4 categories: natural systems, community resources, cultural and historical resources, and then scenic and experiential quality of the county. So starting with the existing trail system is very important. We have worked really hard to get all the data that we can, whether it be from the county and the state, to understand where all of these existing trail systems are, what their character is, what are some of the attributes that are associated with these trails, whether it be their trail width or their surface material, and their essential qualities, and really gathering that to help inform the process. We did find, once we did receive the first round of existing information from the county, that there were certainly gaps in the information that we had of known trails throughout the county. So this is where we found great work with the LPAT subcommittee volunteers that we deployed to help us collect data about any trails that we didn't have in our map geo database, and then fill in those gaps of known information. But not only where we needed information on where trails are that weren't currently mapped, we also had the volunteers help us collect information about the existing trails, where the trailheads are, what their width might be, what the surface of the trail material might be. And so that has been a great service for us moving forward and filling those data gaps. We used just for your information, with the volunteers, we used an app called ArcGIS Collector that had a base map, which is what you see here on the screen, that volunteers went out and used to collect the data over a month, a little over a month time period, which is an easy app, a free app to download that you can put on your smartphone or on your tablet. And these are just some of the points where all the volunteers went out to collect data for us. And you'll see those orange dots are where people went out to go inspect the trails. And then those blue areas are where people noted trail access points, which is also very important. We just wanted to take a second to thank the volunteers. We had 77 volunteers who were all just extremely well-versed, of course, in the local trail system, and shared with us their own data and local knowledge of the existing trail system. We had hikers, bikers, equestrians all go out for us. We collected over 800 new trail inventory points. The volunteers mapped a little over 145 miles of newly mapped trails, and covered a lot of ground, 229 miles about, to be exact. And this was done over actually a 42-day time period. And so we know it wasn't the best time of the year to go out, but we hope that it was a great excuse to get outside. And we are very thankful for that invaluable data that the volunteers provided for us. So if you're a volunteer and you're on the call, thank you so much for all your help. It's been a very important resource for us moving forward in the planning process. Here's just a map looking at the current database of the existing trail network. I know it's hard to see at the county scale all of these sort of noodles of trails throughout the county, but this is about what it looks like. And it's not only just public trails on public land. We also noted public trails that are on privately owned land, so accessible trails. However, it's very important as we move forward to differentiate between the two, since our focus for this planning effort is public trails on public land. But it is also nice for us to know where those privately owned but publicly accessible trails are. The database also includes the National Capital Trail Network for existing and planned trails throughout the county. And then, of course, the large regional trails like the Potomac Heritage, the Washington Old Dominion Trail, and then the Appalachian Trail. You all have a wealth of diverse natural resources across the county, which is quite extraordinary. These are just some of those resources that, again, we have created a database of to help us understand where the opportunities and challenges might be for this connected trail system across the county. Some of those natural systems that we'll be looking at as we look for those opportunities and filling the gaps are floodplains, blueways, which are waterways, whether they be creeks or streams that can also be navigable or not navigable, but nonetheless are waterways throughout the county. Already conserved land or land that already has conservation easements or other types of easement on them. Riparian corridors, which are just the linear areas adjacent to our waterways that reach up to the upper reaches of the county, the wetlands across the county, and then mapping all the diverse habitat types that you have throughout the county. This is just a look at when you put all of those together, the wealth of resources that you have and how those tendrils of those riparian corridors sort of reach throughout the county in relationship to the existing trail system. The other unique thing about Loudoun County that we don't see in all the places that we work is such a rich cultural and historical resources that you all have. We don't have to tell you about those, but these also present great opportunities for connecting the community to these resources and telling those stories that these resources represent. So some of those that we've been collecting are historic places, whether they be locally recognized or nationally recognized historic places. And then looking at community resources such as schools and parks, and also having conversations broader, looking at tourism and connecting with the sort of economic development folks within the county, particularly as it relates to wineries and breweries, but beyond, and making sure that there's potentially an element of tourism that could be supported as a part of the process. And then, of course, the existing trails, and then retail and office. So we're trying to identify destinations, as you can kind of see here with the mention of tourism and schools and parks, but also where are people going, where do they want to go, where are they coming from, looking at retail and office as potential destination places as well. When you put all those together, these are just some of those resources distributed throughout the county. You can see, we've noted where the schools are and the place types, and then those zoning areas that may support today or in the future those potential destinations that people would like to go from their residences. We also are using and making sure that we understand the diversity of the community that exists throughout Loudoun County. You all know from north to south, east to west, there's a very diverse county that you all have. And through the LPAT planning process, we want to make sure that every community is recognized and supported through the trail system so that no one is left out. So we look at beyond sort of just typical demographic data and census data. We also just make sure that as we go through the planning process and looking at it through the equity lens, that we're looking at all kinds of different communities and how this trail system can support their needs, whether it be looking at different socioeconomic statuses, minority status, overall CDC social vulnerability, housing types, dominant transportation types, and household composition. So we just want to make sure as we move forward that we're equitably thinking about the distribution of the trail system. So once we have all of our baseline data, which we now have, we feel like we have a very good handle on, we're now beginning to looking at connecting the dots through what we call resource corridors. And this is where, we would love to have your feedback as a part of the survey, and we'll talk about other ways that you can provide your own take on what you think the priorities should be for Loudoun County. But really connecting the dots through potential resource corridors, trying to find as much as possible overlapping opportunities. Where can we really get the biggest bang for our buck? Also filling the service gaps. And so Loudoun County does have stated service level goals, depending on the density of zoning where you live, where they'd like for every community resident to be within a half a mile or an eighth of a mile of a linear park or trail. And then having conversations about how we balance different user needs through the execution of the plan, whether you're an equestrian or a biker or a hiker, et cetera. How can we best make sure that we're balancing the individual needs of those user groups? And then layering in other opportunities for protecting and enhancing the natural resources. And again, making sure as we move forward that the plan supports sort of equitable amenities across the county. Resource corridors are really important for trail planning and linear park planning, because these are the ways that we can sort of low-hanging fruit for connecting communities together through the trail system, and then also to your natural and cultural resources. So we've listed what those resource corridors are, from sort of low-hanging fruit to more difficult. So of course, public land and already regulated land, such as stream and river corridors and wetlands, where it's you can't build there anyway, and they're already regulated, are easy places for us to begin to connect the dots and fill in the gaps across the county for this interconnected linear parks and trail system, in addition to the floodway and floodplain. A little more difficult, but also a resource corridor that can be considered, are utility easements, Loudoun water easements, where you might have a sewer line or a water line, or other utilities like gas pipelines or electrical, overhead electrical easements. And then a little more difficult to coordinate, but certainly still on the table for where the other resource corridors might be more difficult, are open spaces and subdivisions and communities across the county that can connect residences through their open space to the larger, broader network. So we're looking at all of those as potential ways to create this interconnected system moving forward. When you put all of those together, you can begin to see, again, these tendrils that reach out throughout the county of opportunity to look forward, planning a linear parks and trail system where we don't currently have it. The darker green are, again, the sort of low-hanging fruits of public land and already regulated or areas such as wetlands and riparian corridors. And then the lighter, the green, are those HOA open spaces as potential connection points. But again, there's more beyond these priority sort of resource corridors that we can imagine, but this is where we start in the planning process. As I mentioned earlier, the county has a service level goal for trail access. So this is dependent on the density of where you live. So if you live in a zoning area where the residential unit density is greater than 3 units per an acre, the goal for the LPAT plan is to have a linear park or trail within an eighth of a mile of those residences. And then if you live in a lower density area, 3 units or fewer per an acre, the goal is to have a trail within a half a mile from where you live. And these are actually pretty extraordinary service level goals for the county that we will be looking to provide as a part of the plan. Now, this is a quick just looking at all trails across the county, public and private, and who has access to trails versus who doesn't. We will be focusing in the future looking at only public access and public trails. So this is a little misleading, but does give you sort of a sense of those in the community that don't have access to a public or a private trail throughout the county. So the blue areas are communities with trail access. Now you'll notice in the western part of the county. A lot of those are private trails. And so when we redo this analysis, we'll see that those that don't have access to public trails is pretty much going to be the majority of the county. So we have a bit of work to get it to our level of service goals. But once we identify the gaps of people who don't have access to public trails on public land, we'll then begin to sort of look at what we call sort of the donut holes of who doesn't have access and how can we equitably prioritize the execution of the plan to support the diversity of the communities you have across the county. So we'll look at things like poverty levels or people without cars or minority populations, but also looking at the future build out of Loudoun County through the zoning and the comprehensive plan to not only provide a trail system for people today, but the trail system for the county in the future based on those plans for development. And we know you're a quickly developing county, so it is quite hard to keep up, but you have a great new comprehensive plan and zoning established that we can use to anticipate where those needs might be in the future. So just really quickly, our next steps. So we're certainly at the end of the collecting our baseline data and working towards filling the gaps to create this official countywide trail system. We're starting to have conversations with folks like VDOT and others where we have these really tough connections that have to be made, whether they be across the Potomac or across highways, and trying to understand where those barriers might be so that we can get in place really good plans to execute and connect the trail throughout the county. In addition to looking at new trails, we also looking at your existing trail network and seeing where there might be opportunity to rehabilitate or enhance those trails so that they can support more diverse user types than maybe what they currently are. So we're not forgetting about the existing trail system and how that can be improved upon. And then looking and making sure that we can connect the county trails to your national and local treasures and strengthen connections across adjacent counties, but not just within Virginia, but through all the states that you border. And then, of course, one big sort of goal that we'll be working towards and looking for your feedback on are filling the gaps and prioritizing how those gaps get filled over time. So I am going to pass it over to Lindsay to talk about the signature project. But again, at the end of the conversation, we'll do questions and answers, but then also talk about ways that you can share your vision for the LPAT plan and continue to stay updated on the project process. So Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, this is Lindsay. As Emily mentioned already, the signature project is a really good opportunity for us to explore and to demonstrate some of the principles of the larger linear parks and trails framework plan, but within a specific trail master plan project. So on the next slide, we have an image on the left that shows, again, that countywide resource corridors map that Emily spoke to earlier. And then enlarged on the right is a view of the signature project area. And so you can see in this enlargement map that this area has a really great concentration of those resource corridors that are based on environmental and parcel ownership characteristics. So on the next slide is here's another view of that same area of the signature project loop trail. And so you can see on this diagram to the north, that red line is the existing Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail. To the south, that red line is the existing Washington and Old Dominion Trail. And then between the two are the scenic Goose Creek and Broad Run river corridors. So there's an opportunity there along those river corridors to protect land along those rivers in order to serve this, this multiple benefit purpose of not only protecting those natural resources, but also providing public access to those areas while filling these two critical gaps between these two important regional trail systems. So the next slide has some pictures of the existing Potomac Heritage and W&OD trails that lie to the north and south of the Signature Project loop. And so moving from left to right, we have pictures of the Potomac Heritage Trail. There's an image of a wetland that's near Bliss Park, near Broad Run. And then the other images show the sort of natural surface and the general characteristics of the Potomac Heritage Trail along Goose Creek, including where it passes alongside the remnants of the historical Goose Creek Canal. And then the images on the right of the screen show the pictures of the existing W&OD trail, which for the entire stretch of the Signature Project has separated trails, asphalt and aggregate, that are able to serve a really good mix of walkers, bikers, and equestrian users. So on the east part of the Signature Project loop, along the Broad Run, one really exciting part of the Signature Project master plan is looking at creating a new trailhead and bridge crossing at the site of the historic Broad Run Tollhouse, which will also be restored as part of the project. So there's an opportunity at this site also for a kayak and canoe landing as part of planning for a broader Broad Run paddle trail. This site is currently not open to the public, and so through this process, the redevelopment and the renovation of this site will be a great new way for the public to access these great historical and natural resources through limited site parking, but also through new underpass trails and bridge connections that will build really great new trail connections in all directions from this site. And then on the next slide, on the west side of the Signature Project loop, along Goose Creek, is the existing Keep Loudoun Beautiful Park. And that's what all of these images show, is images of the existing park, the parking area, the existing picnic area and kayak and canoe put in, and then a view of Goose Creek where it is aligned against Keep Loudoun Beautiful Park. And so on this side of the loop and at this site, there's room for improvements to these existing site features, along with new opportunities for signage, wayfinding, important new trail connections, both to the north and south, but also again, by way of a new bridge over Goose Creek and an underpass trail under Highway 7, so that those important connections can be made to the Signature Project Loop Trail from neighborhoods to the east and west. So on the next slide, this illustrates the basic process that we're following for the Signature Project Master Plan. So the priority trail gaps and access points are informed by the larger Linear Parks and Trails Framework Plan. And then we'll follow a process that's driven by the site-specific environmental conditions and larger community context in order to align the new trails, to design trail experiences that serve multiple users, that provide accessibility, and that also reflect a special sense of place. The master plan will also identify opportunities to connect the places and destinations and existing trails that lie beyond the Signature Project loop. And it'll also provide recommendations for phasing, fundraising, and acquiring the access that will be needed to complete the Signature Project loop. This diagram shows, again, those existing trails to the north and south of the project area. And then the dashed lines to the east and west show the general corridors where we're pursuing trail alignments and also improvements for future Goose Creek and Broad Run paddle trails. So the labels call out the different structures that will be needed in order to create really good separated crossings where the trails intersect with existing roads and waterways, and also where certain trail structures will be needed in order to connect to the existing regional trails. One thing that's so great about the signature project loop is that once it's all connected, it'll have a really great diversity of trail types and experiences. Everything from blueway or paddle trails along the Broad Run and Goose Creek, natural surface trails that are similar to what's already seen on the Potomac Heritage Trail, those mix of paved and aggregate trails like on the W&OD, and then along with boardwalks and similar elevated trails that will allow the trail alignment to really carefully navigate through wetlands and other sensitive natural environments along the loop alignment. On this slide are both local and national examples of some of the trail structures and what they, examples of what those might look like along the signature project loop. So that includes new gateways and signage, in addition to bridges, underpass trails, ramps, overlooks, and stream crossings. And in terms of sort of designing a special trail experience and also carrying over some of those elements to the larger linear park and trails framework plan, this process is helping to develop a countywide language for different trail types, different.
Lindsay, I think we lost you. While Lindsay hopefully logs back on and maybe Adeline, you can just send her a note. Oh, are you there, Lindsay? No? Okay, well, while we wait for Lindsay, sorry about that. We do have a couple polling questions that we'd like to ask of you. We were gonna wait till the end, but now seems like a great time. So the next polling question that we have is, currently, what trail and linear park activity do you most participate in? You know, which means the majority of the time when you do visit a trail. So this is just how you currently use the linear park and trail system as it is today. And we'll give you about 30 more seconds here to give us your feedback on what your preferences are, what you like to do most. It looks like here we have about half of the people responding so far, 70%, and I'll just give it a couple more seconds and end the polling. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's see what people say. It looks like this is very similar to what we saw earlier today, that most folks enjoy hiking and walking on the existing trail, linear park and trail system, and then second, biking. And then the next question that we have, which is about the future or what you would like to see, which is what trail linear park activity would you like most to participate in if in the future, if the facilities existed near you or at all. And so we have just looking to the future, what would you like to do that you can't currently do based on whatever barriers you might have to conducting these activities. So we'll give you all another 20 seconds to fill in. We have about half of the folks have responded so far. It looks like hiking and walking is leading again on this question. So we'll just give you a couple more seconds. We have 80%, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll end polling. And again, you'll have time to give feedback in other ways, but we just thought this might be a good way to interact and see what you're thinking. It looks like here hiking and walking are the top. Second to that is, non-motorized boating, such as kayaking and canoeing, and then biking. Well, thank you all for participating. This is really great to just see what you're thinking just really quickly amongst the group, and is actually quite similar to what we heard earlier today. So I think I filled the time. Lindsay, are you back?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, you all. So I think I was just saying that I think we're excited about the opportunity both within the signature project and the larger Linear Parks and Trails Master Plan to develop a language and some branding and signage and wayfinding that all speak to the character of Loudoun County, as seen here in some of the images that were taken from the Potomac Heritage and W&OD stretches of the signature project loop. And so another really important piece of both the signature project and the countywide Linear Parks and Trails Plan is being able to piece together these connected trail networks through a combination of land that is publicly owned and land that is privately owned, but where public trail access is provided through an access easement or through some other agreement with the private landowner. So you can see part of what made this area a great location for the signature project loop trail is that much of the land along the existing trail gaps is either under public ownership or it's privately owned but currently has a public access easement for future trails. So there are just a few access gaps along a few privately owned parcels. And in the next few slides, we'll walk through a few of the real estate tools that are used in Loudoun County and elsewhere to fill those gaps. So these 4 big tools are the ones that have sort of risen to the top based on our conversation so far with Loudoun County officials and with their planning counterparts in other counties and municipalities in Virginia and elsewhere. So the first one up here are proffers, which are unique to Virginia, and they allow the county, as part of the approval process for new developments, to negotiate for linear park and trail access and improvements. A big benefit of this is that these proffers often result in the acquisition of large connected tracts of land, which is great for piecing together a connected trail network. And a drawback is, of course, that the use of proffers is dependent on the rate of new development in an area. So it's less of a beneficial tool for rural or for already developed areas. Fee simple acquisition, that just refers to the county or another public body acquiring a property outright. And so a big benefit of this approach is that it grants the county the most flexibility in site-wide trail alignment and in the design of other site access and linear park features. A drawback is that because the county is the owner of the full property, the county is responsible for the long-term maintenance and upkeep of the entire property. Access and open space easements are a very popular and effective tool for piecing together trail networks. They basically allow the full property to remain under private ownership and management while granting permanent public access for trail use and improvements within a trail corridor that is defined within the language of the easement and is specific to each property. And the last tool here is the land lease, which allows for trail access and improvements to be negotiated for finite periods of time. And so some places see this as a really good interim step toward building a trail network and toward building relationships with private property owners. And the drawback, of course, is that trail access on leased land could be revoked at any moment and could result in the disruption of the larger trail network. And finally, the last slide for the signature project just reinforces a really important goal of the signature project loop trail master plan to identify ways that we can build or improve trail connections to local destinations. So to public parks, schools, cultural and historical sites, dining and shopping areas, and local residential neighborhoods that are close to the signature project loop trail. So the signature project is not only an opportunity to bridge these this gap between these two important regional trails to the north and the south, but also to plan for and build those important trail connections at the local level so that more people in the area can have access to these regional trail systems by using local trail networks and without having to get in their car to drive to a trailhead. And I will pass it back over to Emily.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lindsay. Before we get into questions and answers, we wanted to just talk about, I know there's a couple questions about trying to understand what kind of feedback we're hoping to get from you all. So there's going to be, as I mentioned earlier, a couple touch points for us to get feedback from you. And the home base for getting up to date on the process, where the recordings of this presentation will be hosted and where other resources will be held is the county's website. And so we do have a link here shown on the slide. We encourage you to stay up to date and visit that website to see the resources that you will have. Corey also just posted a link to that website in the chat for you all. So if you wanted to go ahead and head over there while we're talking. And there you'll also find survey number 1, which is where we'd like to hear your thoughts on the big picture vision, the opportunities and challenges you see for linear parks. Really just sort of give us your initial ideas for the linear parks and trails system. So you can do that through the survey, and we encourage you to share that again with your colleagues, neighbors, and friends. We've also been posting links to these feedback touch points on social media and through the county's website. In addition, on the county website, there is a comment form where it's just, you can, give us any of your thoughts that you want to share with us. We receive all of those comments. They come directly to us, and we're compiling those for incorporation into the overall plan. So please take the project survey. The first one especially. We'll be doing another survey in our next touch point a month from now, and we'll be looking forward to getting feedback from you at that time as well. This is just a look into where we've been, where we're headed. Again, before we get into questions and answers, we kicked off this project in October, conducted the volunteer mapping until about January 19th. And here we are in the first community workshop with a second workshop to follow about a month from today. We do have all of your email addresses. In addition, we'll be sending links to these resources, the recording of the presentation today. We also had a presentation earlier today that will also be posted that, again, you're welcome to refer back to. But we'll also be reaching out to you soon about that next community workshop and then the next survey. The survey number 1 will be open for the life of the project, but we're going to ask, and we'll put this on the website, that we would like to get your feedback on the survey. We'll leave it open again for the life of the project, but we'd like your feedback within a month. And so we'll put the exact date on the website for you all to respond so that we can make sure that we get feedback from you all to incorporate into the next iteration of the plan that we're currently putting together. In May, the plan will go under review it'll be open to the community for review, the LPAT subcommittee, and we'll make revisions. And then hopefully we'll get looking forward to plan adoption by late summer with those revisions based on community input and the Board of Supervisors and the LPAT subcommittee feedback. So that's just sort of a broad stroke look at where we've been, where we're headed. We're looking forward to all the great comments that we hope to get from you, that we're already starting to get. And with that, Adeline, I know we have about 6 minutes left. Are there any particular questions that we should focus on?
Let's see. So it looks like we have a couple of questions about potential partnerships and about specific parts of the county that may be factored in this project. One of them from Linda says, is there a possibility to work with an organization such as the Nature Conservancy or to encourage homeowners who have large properties to place part of the land in conservation easement to protect it from development?
Great question. We have already started to and will continue to engage with potential stakeholder groups and potential ally partners throughout the county to execute this linear parks and trails plan. And that includes conversations not only with adjacent counties, but also folks like the Nature Conservancy. As Lindsay showed in our real estate toolkit, conservation lands are really important. And when we think about the western part of the county and all of the private land, it really will take consideration for easements and working with landowners, particularly on the western side, but throughout the whole county to create this connected system across the county. So that will be a part of the process, and speaking with those potential allied groups like the Nature Conservancy moving forward. And we have heard from other municipal governments and county governments like in Charlottesville, their success strategies and the way that they've implemented their plan. And so those best practices through those interviews that we've conducted with those success stories across Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond are tools that we're also going to insert into the process as a potential tools for the county and continue those conversations, whether they be sort of foundation or other sort of avenues for getting land set aside for the linear parks and trails system.
We also
so I hope that answered your question.
We have a question that I didn't want to lose in the chat. It says, are community trail systems incorporated in the baseline you created? Specifically, are many HOA trails, which are hundreds of miles and in gap areas in some cases. You mentioned HOA spaces. Not sure if that is the same.
Thank you for that question. So the HOA trails, we have some of them documented, but we don't have all of them. And we do realize that that's a wealth of potential resources for connectivity. There is a consortium of the HOAs that is a part of our stakeholder group that we'll be reaching out to. Our charge has been to start with the public land and public opportunities because those are easier for us in the beginning, but we will be talking with HOAs, but we don't currently have all of those trails mapped. We have a good sense of where many of them are, but we do not have all of them mapped. And so we're hoping through conversations with that consortium of HOA groups across the county that we can get more information and understand where those access points potentially could be. But as you can imagine, through the county, it's very hard to tell an HOA or private landowners what to do with their land. And so just understanding where those opportunities are, but also starting those conversations and those relationships is a part of our process and looking at our stakeholder groups. And so we will be in the near future speaking with those groups to gauge their interests in their communities. And every community is unique. And so it'll take a bit of conversation and back and forth to establish where those opportunities lie, but it will be a part of our process.
And it looks like we have a couple of questions about maps. Dallas says, can you discuss maps? Different users have different needs, from online maps, live maps, via some cell phone maps, and proper maps for users going longer distances. And Dallas, if you'd like to elaborate, feel free.
Oh, maps for navigating.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. For navigating the trail system in the future. Well, what we're hoping is we have created, we do have an online database. It's not ready for public use at this moment because we need to curate and correct some of errors or make sure that there's not, we're not showing trails on private land. So we're going through that process right now, but we have created a database of a live map for the county that really was created as a part of the volunteer effort that we see as a potential great resource in the future for the trail system. And we haven't talked a whole lot about this, but we do think that it will be really important. I know here where we are in Raleigh, we have a wealth of greenway systems throughout our county and the region, miles and miles of connected trails. However, it's very difficult to know when trails might be inundated or have, after a flood, they might have silt or soil on them and other sort of information that might in live time be beneficial to the user group. So we see in the future, since you all are the data capital of the world, that there will be built upon this database that we've created with the volunteer group, a way for you to interact with not only where the trails are, how to navigate with them through the trails in live time, but maybe also finding other information about trail closures or maintenance needs across the county. So we see great value in that. Another resource that we use that we haven't really talked about too much, there is an app called Strava that for those that might use it, is also a great resource. It's a private app, but I know a lot of joggers and bikers use it to track their movement, and that's a great resource to see where those opportunities might lie from a recreation standpoint across the county. But we're hoping that as a part of this process, we'll have put together this strategy for embedding technology and different user needs through that technology, or even a mixture of analog and digital tools so that people can navigate the trail. I'm really glad that you brought that up because it actually hasn't been a part of our conversation yet, but I do think it'll be an important part of a usable future LPAT system in the future. So thank you for mentioning that. I think we have time. We're a couple minutes past, but I'd be happy to maybe do one more, Adeline.
Okay. We have a question about the timeline for the signature project.
Sure, I see that one from Gary. Great one about county funding. So one of the deliverables that we'll be producing for the master plan of the signature project is a cost estimate so that the county will know what it will take to fill this gap to create the signature project loop. And so from my understanding, the budgeting hasn't been secured quite yet, but this is an opportunity to define what funding is needed to complete the loop so that it could be embedded in future capital plans moving forward. So that is one of the stated goals of the master planning of the signature project, is to get those cost estimates for implementation so that the county has a really good solid number that they can use moving forward to invest in that signature project. So I hope that answers your question for you all. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I know it's getting late in the evening. Thank you all so much for your participation. We've had a really great turnout. We had over 100 people participate at noon today, and I think today we've had up to 75 people on the call. So again, we'll be posting the recordings of these presentations to the county's website, in addition to hoping that people go to the website and participate in the survey that is already live. And again, please share with your neighbors, your family, your colleagues, so that we can get as much feedback as we possibly can. You are a very diverse county, and so it's going to take a bit of effort to make sure that we get all voices heard as a part of the project. So we hope that you all can be our disciples moving forward and sharing what you've learned today and beyond. So thank you again for your participation, and we hope you have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll see you again in about a month. So have a great one. Thanks again.